The hospital room was sterile, too quiet. It had been a week since the miscarriage, and Sarah had barely left the small room since then. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions: grief, anger, confusion, and exhaustion. The pain in her heart was far worse than the physical ache. The life she had once dreamt of, the baby she'd lost, felt like a distant memory already slipping away. The fluorescent lights buzzed above her, their cold glow casting an unnatural light on the bare walls. A small bouquet of flowers from her mother sat in the corner, wilting already. Visitors had stopped coming. The calls had slowed to nothing. They were all too busy, too distant now. She hadn't been the same since the loss, and no one seemed to know how to handle it. Sarah reached over to her bedside table and grabbed the envelope that had been left there, untouched, for the past 2 days. It was strange, she hadn't expected anything. The envelope had no return address, and the handwriting on the front looked unfamiliar. She hesitated, her fingers grazing the paper as a shiver ran down her spine. Who could possibly be sending her something? Especially now? She didn't want to open it. She really didn't. But something in her told her that she needed to. The curiosity gnawed at her. The worst of the grief was behind her, or so she told herself, but something about the silence around her had begun to feel suffocating. It was as if no one had a place for her anymore. But here, in her hand, was something, anything, that could break the monotony of the days since the loss. Taking a deep breath, Sarah tore open the top, carefully peeling back the flap. Her heartbeat quickened as she pulled out a single piece of paper. The handwriting was neat but forceful, the words standing out against the white paper like they had been written with urgency. Her eyes scanned the first few lines, her mind struggling to make sense of what she was reading. Sarah, I know you are in pain. What you are about to read will change everything. Her breath hitched, and she nearly dropped the paper. A lump formed in her throat as she tried to steady herself, eyes blurring. Change everything? What could possibly change now? Her life felt shattered already. Nothing could fix this. But the letter continued, pulling her in deeper. You have been lied to. The truth is far worse than you know. Her stomach twisted, and a chill spread over her. Who would write this to her? Why? She scanned the next few sentences with urgency. The miscarriage wasn't just an accident. It was orchestrated. And it's not what you think. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She read those words again. Orchestrated? What the hell was this? Her hands shook as she read further, her mind racing in a desperate attempt to make sense of it all. There are people involved. Powerful people. People you trust. But their secrets are about to be exposed. Her heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to put the letter down, to throw it across the room, but something kept her reading. The words felt like they were pulling her in, dragging her further into something she wasn't sure she wanted to understand. Before you make any decisions, Sarah, I need you to know this: your husband is not who you think he is. The letter dropped from her hands, her body going cold. Her mind refused to process it. Her husband, David, was everything to her. He had been by her side through it all. Not who you think he is? What did that even mean? How could he not be who she thought he was? Sarah felt a tightness in her chest, and for a moment, it felt as though the room was closing in on her. She stumbled to her feet, her vision swimming as her knees buckled beneath her. The paper remained on the floor where it had fallen, its words mocking her with every breath she took. She reached down and grabbed it again, reading the final sentence. The truth will come to light soon. And when it does, you'll understand why they mocked you. The words hit her like a blow to the gut. They mocked you. The laughter, the whispers, she hadn't imagined them, had she? The people who had come to visit, who had once been her close friends, they had turned cold. No one had known what to say, and in the silence, there had been judgment. Sarah didn't want to believe it. She couldn't. Her thoughts were too scattered, her emotions too raw. She didn't want to think about the possibility that anyone, least of all her husband, could have had anything to do with the loss of her baby. But then, why would someone write this letter? Why would they send it to her? The clock on the wall ticked louder now, each second a reminder of the overwhelming silence that had taken over her life. Sarah closed her eyes, clutching the letter to her chest. She had no idea what to do with the information she had just received. Her mind was reeling, but one thing was clear: she couldn't just sit here and do nothing. She needed answers. There was a knock at the door, and Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She quickly shoved the letter into her bedside drawer, hoping no one would see the chaos inside her mind. When she opened the door, she found her sister, Emily, standing in the doorway with a small, forced smile. "How are you holding up?" Emily asked softly, stepping inside. Sarah nodded, her throat tight. "I'm managing." Emily looked at her with concern, her eyes flickering to the bedside table. "I heard from Mom you were getting some rest. Maybe we should talk about what's going on." "I'm fine," Sarah interrupted quickly, not wanting to break down in front of her. She had always tried to hide the worst of it from Emily. She couldn't let anyone see how deeply she was hurting, not now. "I just need some time." Emily didn't argue. Instead, she stepped forward and hugged Sarah, holding her close for a moment. "I'm here, okay? If you need anything, just let me know." After a long pause, Emily stepped back, casting a glance at the drawer where Sarah had hidden the letter. Sarah could feel her sister's gaze but didn't dare look back. "I'll be back tomorrow," Emily said, giving her a small, knowing smile. "Take care of yourself." Once Emily left, Sarah's body went rigid with tension. She moved over to the drawer and pulled out the letter once more. The words were burning into her, but the more she thought about them, the more they made sense. Her mind raced with questions: who was sending these letters? Why now? And what did it mean for David? The suspense clawed at her, the knot in her stomach tightening with every passing second. She needed answers. The night felt colder than usual, as if the chill from the outside world had seeped into her very bones. Sarah sat at her desk, staring at the letter in front of her, her fingers gripping the paper tightly. The words from the mysterious note haunted her thoughts. The revelation about David. Her husband, the man she had shared her life with, made it impossible to focus on anything else. The thought of him being involved in something so sinister seemed unfathomable. But the letter said it, and that truth was burning through her chest. She had spent the whole day trying to make sense of it all. She had gone over the letter again and again, reading the same lines, trying to connect the dots. But nothing fit. Nothing made sense. Sarah had called her mother earlier, trying to find some sort of comfort, but the conversation felt strained. Her mother's voice had been soft, cautious. She was worried about Sarah, but it was clear that no one knew what to say. The only person who might have known something was David. But now, Sarah wasn't sure if she could trust him. "Your husband is not who you think he is," the letter had said. She couldn't get those words out of her mind. What if David had been lying to her all this time? What if there was something he had been hiding, something far darker than she could ever imagine? She thought back to their relationship, to the years they had spent together. How many times had they laughed together, held each other, supported each other through tough times? How many promises had they made, vows to always be there, no matter what? Could it all have been a lie? Her phone buzzed on the desk, breaking her out of her spiraling thoughts. It was a message from David. "Hey, I'll be home soon. We need to talk." Her heart skipped a beat. The message was vague, almost too vague. Was this his way of admitting that he knew something was wrong? That he knew she had found the letter? Or was he just trying to keep things normal? She stared at the message for a long time before she typed out a reply. "Okay. She put the phone down and stood up, pacing around the room. The thoughts swirled in her mind like a storm, one that she couldn't control. What was she supposed to say to him when he got home? How could she confront him about something so monstrous without losing everything? Just then, the doorbell rang, and her breath hitched. She froze for a moment, the weight of the situation crashing down on her. The timing felt too perfect, too orchestrated. She hurried to the door, her heart racing. When she opened it, she saw David standing there, his face tired but hopeful. He was still in his work clothes, a slight frown on his face, but there was something else there, something she couldn't quite place. "Hey," he said softly, stepping inside and giving her a quick kiss on the cheek. "How are you holding up?" Sarah stepped back, letting him in, but the distance between them felt much wider than it ever had before. She looked at him carefully, trying to read his expression, searching for any signs that he knew what was coming. "I'm fine," she said, her voice betraying none of the fear and confusion she was feeling inside. "We need to talk." David nodded, his eyes softening. He walked over to the couch and sat down, patting the seat next to him. "I know, Sarah. I know we've been distant lately. I didn't mean to. I've just been trying to deal with everything in my own way." Sarah sat down beside him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She could feel the tension in her chest growing. How could she even begin to ask him about the letter without sounding insane? Without pushing him away? But she had no choice. The truth had to come out. "David, I need to know something." Her voice cracked slightly, and she cleared her throat. "What's going on? What's really going on?" "I found something, a letter. And it says things that I don't understand. Things about us. About you." David's face immediately stiffened. His eyes darted away from hers, and Sarah noticed the slight tremble in his hand as he reached for his glass of water on the table. His usual calm, collected demeanor was gone. For the first time in years, he looked genuinely nervous. "Sarah, I don't know what you're talking about." His voice was tight, defensive. But there was a hint of something else there, a flicker of fear that she had never seen before. "Don't lie to me, David," Sarah said, her voice hardening. She couldn't stop herself from feeling betrayed. "I found a letter. It said you're not who I think you are. That this whole thing, everything we've had, it's all been a lie." David's face paled, and for a moment, he looked like he had been slapped. His eyes widened, and he took a deep breath, as though trying to steady himself. "Who sent you that letter, Sarah?" His voice was low, almost a whisper. "I don't know," she replied. "But it says the miscarriage wasn't an accident. That it was orchestrated. And that you're involved in something. Something I don't understand." The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. Sarah watched as David's hands shook slightly, his jaw tightening. It was like the walls of their perfect life had just started crumbling around them, and he couldn't hold it together any longer. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely audible. "Sarah, you don't understand. I never wanted you to get hurt. I never wanted this for you. For us. But there are things I've been trying to protect you from." "What things?" Sarah demanded. "What are you hiding, David?" David looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of guilt and sorrow. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The weight of his silence was deafening. After a long pause, he finally said, "I never wanted you to find out this way. But, you deserve to know the truth." He took a deep breath, his eyes locking with hers. "The miscarriage wasn't an accident, Sarah. But it wasn't because of me. It wasn't something I wanted. It was something much bigger than us." "What do you mean?" Sarah whispered, her voice shaking with fear. David looked away, his expression distant, as though he was seeing something far away, something that haunted him. "I've been involved in things, Sarah. Things that I should have kept you away from. But I didn't. And now it's all coming back." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. The words he was saying didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. But the fear in his eyes told her that there was something else, something he wasn't telling her. "David," she said, her voice shaking. Please tell me what's really going on." David stood up, pacing in front of her. "I'm trying to, but you wouldn't believe me. You wouldn't want to. I'm your wife." Sarah shot back, standing up as well. "You think I wouldn't believe you? After everything? You think I wouldn't stand by you? I'm not some stranger. I'm your wife, David. You have to trust me." For a moment, David froze, his shoulders slumping. He closed his eyes and sighed heavily. When he opened them again, his expression had softened. "I do trust you, Sarah. But I'm not sure you're ready to hear this." Her breath caught in her throat. "I need to know. I need to know the truth, David. Or I'll never be able to move forward. I'll never be able to move past this." David hesitated, then nodded slowly. He sat back down beside her, his voice barely audible. "I've been working with people you don't know. People who have plans that involve us. And this miscarriage, it was no accident. They made sure it happened. They knew what they were doing, and now it's too late." Sarah's heart shattered. The air around her seemed to vanish. She was suffocating. "Who?" she managed to choke out, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who did this, David? Who would want to hurt us like this?" David closed his eyes, his face pale. "I can't tell you that. Not yet. But I will. I swear I will. Just trust me for now. Please." Sarah stood motionless in the dimly lit room, staring at David, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. His words echoed in her ears, the miscarriage, it wasn't an accident. They made sure it happened. She shook her head, trying to process what he had just confessed. Her world, which had already been shattered by the loss of their baby, seemed to collapse further with each passing moment. The weight of his admission was almost too much to bear. Who were these people he spoke of? Why was David involved in something so dark, so sinister? Her breath quickened, and she pressed a trembling hand to her chest. The room seemed to close in around her. How had it all come to this? Just a few weeks ago, life had felt so normal. She had been planning for a future, excited and hopeful. Now, everything was uncertain, and the one person she trusted most seemed to be hiding the most dangerous secrets. David had slumped in the chair, his face pale, his eyes tired. He was a man on the edge, as if the weight of everything he had been involved in was starting to crush him. The guilt in his eyes was overwhelming, but it wasn't enough to make Sarah trust him again. "Not yet. I don't understand," she whispered, her voice shaking with emotion. "Who are these people, David? What do they want from us? Why did they target me, us?" David closed his eyes, as though the words he was about to say would rip him apart. "It's not as simple as you think, Sarah. I was involved with people who were, well, dangerous. People who have their hands in everything. Money, power, influence. They don't care about right or wrong. They only care about control. About their agenda." "Agenda?" Sarah echoed, her mind racing. "What kind of agenda? And why didn't you tell me any of this? Why didn't you trust me enough to keep me in the loop?" David stood up suddenly, running a hand through his hair. "I tried to protect you. I didn't want you to get caught in the crossfire. You're not supposed to know any of this. You weren't supposed to get involved. But when you..." When you got pregnant, things changed. They saw you as a liability. Her stomach turned. What do you mean by that? A liability? I was just living my life, David. I wasn't some pawn in their game. David sighed deeply, turning to face her. He looked tortured, as if every word he spoke was a burden he had been carrying for far too long. It wasn't about you directly, Sarah. It was about what you represented. You were the link between me and them. The perfect cover. But when you got pregnant, they decided they couldn't risk it. They made sure you lost the baby, and they didn't care what it did to us. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she stumbled backward, the realization of what he was saying beginning to sink in. So, you're telling me they made this happen? You're telling me my baby's death was no accident? David nodded, his eyes hollow with regret. Yes. And I couldn't stop it. I couldn't protect you from them. I should have told you sooner. But I thought I could fix it, I thought it would all blow over. I thought I could keep you safe. Sarah felt as though the ground beneath her feet had given way. This is insane. How could you be involved with people like this? We were supposed to be building a life together, David. How could you lie to me all this time? David took a step forward, his face desperate. I didn't want to lie to you. But you don't understand what's at stake. If I had told you, they would have come after both of us. They would have done worse than just what happened with the miscarriage. I kept you in the dark to keep you safe. You were my priority, always. But now, Sarah, they've come for us. And I don't know how much longer I can protect you. The weight of his words crashed down on her, and she felt herself suffocating. How had she not seen the signs? How had she missed the small, strange moments? The times David would disappear for hours, the cryptic conversations on the phone, the way his eyes would darken whenever certain names were mentioned. The clues had been there all along, but she had been so blinded by her love for him, so consumed by the idea of their life together, that she hadn't noticed the growing shadows around them. David's voice broke through her thoughts. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I should have protected you better. I never should have let this happen. But you did, Sarah said quietly, the bitterness creeping into her voice. You let this happen. And I don't know how to forgive you for that. You let them hurt me. You let them hurt our baby. David's face crumpled with grief, and he reached out to her, his hand trembling. I never wanted this. I never wanted you to hurt. I love you, Sarah. I love you more than anything. But now we're in too deep. We can't escape them. They'll come for us. They'll come for you, too. Sarah pulled away, stepping back from him. The walls that had been built between them over the last few days felt like they were growing taller with each passing second. How could she love someone who had allowed such darkness into their life? How could she trust him now, after everything he had kept from her? Her eyes locked onto his, and for the first time, she saw him for who he truly was. He wasn't the man she had married. He wasn't the man who had promised to protect her, to give her everything. He was a man ensnared in a web of lies, tangled in something far more dangerous than she could ever have imagined. I don't know what to do anymore, she whispered, the tears now streaming down her face. I don't know who you are, David. I don't know who any of this is anymore. David's face twisted with anguish. I swear, Sarah, I'll do anything to make this right. But we can't go back. Not anymore. We have to keep moving forward, together. They're watching us. We can't let them win. Sarah's mind was spinning. She needed time to think, to process all of this. But she couldn't stay here, not now. Not with everything hanging in the air between them like a dark cloud. She turned away from him, her heart breaking with each step. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she couldn't stay in this house, in this life, not yet. Not when everything felt like it was falling apart. As she walked out the door, David called after her. "Sarah! Don't go. Please, I need you. I love you." She didn't stop. She couldn't. She needed answers. She needed to find the truth, for herself, for her lost baby, and for the woman she used to be. There was no turning back now. The path ahead was uncertain, but Sarah was determined to uncover every secret, to expose every lie. She had to know the truth, no matter the cost. The city streets blurred into a hazy mess of lights and shadows as Sarah walked aimlessly through the quiet, late-night world. The chill of the evening air cut through her clothes, but she barely noticed. Her mind was too consumed with the revelations from David. The letter, the miscarriage, the dark secrets he had been hiding, it all felt like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Her heart was heavy with grief, but it was no longer just the loss of their baby that weighed on her. It was the realization that the man she had married, her partner, the one person she trusted above all others, had been lying to her for so long. The betrayal was far deeper than anything she could have imagined. She had built her life around him, around their love, their future, their dreams. And now, it felt like everything was crumbling before her eyes. David had told her they were being watched. He had warned her that they couldn't escape, that there was no going back. But Sarah wasn't ready to accept that. She couldn't. Not when there was so much she didn't understand. Not when there were so many unanswered questions still lingering. The streets grew quieter as she walked, each step heavy with determination. She had to find the answers, no matter where they led. She had to know who these people were that David had been involved with. She needed to know why they targeted her, why they had made sure she lost the baby. And more than anything, she needed to know what kind of danger she was in. She found herself standing in front of a small cafe, its neon sign flickering weakly in the darkness. It had been one of her favorite spots before all of this madness started. The familiarity of it felt comforting, but she knew she couldn't hide here forever. She had to keep moving forward. But for now, the warmth inside called to her like a quiet refuge. The bell above the door chimed as she entered, and the cozy interior greeted her with the scent of freshly brewed coffee and the soft hum of conversations. She was barely aware of the people around her, her eyes scanning the room like a hunter searching for a target. She needed someone who could help her. Someone who might have answers. Behind the counter stood an older man, his face creased with age and experience. His name was Robert, and he had been a close friend of David's for years. Robert had always been friendly to Sarah, and she had occasionally caught him exchanging hushed conversations with David. But the man had always seemed distant, hard to read. Tonight, she didn't care about the small talk or pleasantries. She needed to ask him questions that might get her closer to the truth. She walked up to the counter, her heart racing. Robert looked up from wiping the counter, his eyes narrowing as he recognized her. "Sarah," he greeted her with a nod, but his tone was cautious. "Everything all right?" Sarah hesitated, her gaze flickering toward the door. She knew she couldn't trust anyone just yet. But Robert might know more than he was letting on. He had been a part of David's world long before Sarah had come into the picture. He had to know something. "Robert," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I need your help." He raised an eyebrow, his gaze sharp and calculating. "My help? I'm not sure what I can do for you, Sarah. What's going on?" "I need to know about David," she said, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to stay composed. "I need to know everything. Please." For a moment, Robert said nothing. He looked at her as if he were deciding whether to speak, whether to reveal the truths he knew. But then his face softened, and he sighed, leaning forward slightly. "I can't tell you everything, Sarah. You don't want to know everything." "Why?" she asked, her frustration bubbling up. Why can't you tell me? I deserve to know, Robert. I'm his wife. I deserve the truth. He seemed to struggle with his words, his eyes darting around the room. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. You don't understand the kind of people David's been mixed up with. It's not something you can just walk away from, Sarah. They won't let you. Her heart pounded in her chest. Who are they, Robert? Who are these people? Robert's expression hardened, and he leaned back, shaking his head slowly. I can't give you names. But I'll tell you this much, you've already gotten too close. They'll be watching you now. They know what David's been involved in, and they'll stop at nothing to make sure their secrets stay buried. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, but she pushed it aside. She couldn't back down now. Not when she was so close to the truth. What happened with the miscarriage, Robert? Was it them? Did they have something to do with it? Robert's eyes darkened, his mouth tightening. He didn't answer right away, and Sarah could feel the tension building between them. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he spoke in a low voice. They did it, Sarah. They're the ones who orchestrated it. They knew about the pregnancy, and they knew it would be a threat to their plans. So they made sure it didn't happen. It wasn't an accident. It was a message. A message? Sarah repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. A message for who? Robert's eyes flicked toward the door, as if checking to see if anyone was listening. Then, in a voice so quiet she had to strain to hear it, he said, For you, Sarah. They're not just after David. They're after you, too. You're a part of this now, whether you want to be or not. Sarah felt a wave of nausea roll over her. What do you mean? What do they want from me? Robert looked at her gravely. I don't know. But they're not going to stop until they get what they want. And you can't just walk away from this, Sarah. You have to be careful. These people, they'll do anything to protect themselves. They'll do anything to make sure their secrets stay buried. And they'll hurt anyone who gets in their way. Sarah felt the weight of his words settling into her bones. She had been so naive, so trusting. She had thought that love and loyalty could protect her from everything. But now she understood. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. The world she thought she knew was not what it seemed. And the man she had loved, the man she had trusted above all others, was at the center of it all. Thank you, Robert, she said, her voice hollow with realization. But I need to know more. I need to find out who they are and why they want me. I have to understand what I'm up against. Robert stood up from behind the counter, his face hardening. I don't think you understand, Sarah. There are some things you're better off not knowing. Some doors, once you open them, there's no closing them again. But Sarah had already made up her mind. She wasn't going to turn back. Not now. Not when she was so close to uncovering the truth. Sarah's footsteps echoed in the quiet hallway as she moved through the building, her heart pounding in her chest. Every fiber of her being screamed to turn back, to run away from whatever she was about to uncover. But her feet continued forward, pressing her toward the truth she could no longer ignore. The air in the building was thick with tension, as if the walls themselves held their breath. Sarah's mind raced with questions. She had spent days tracking down every lead, every clue that pointed her toward the organization that had manipulated her life. She had spoken to people who knew too much, but too little at the same time. Robert had been her first breakthrough, but his words had left her with more questions than answers. And now, she was here, inside a nondescript office building, a place that had once been just another part of the city's busy downtown core. Now, it felt like a haunted maze, the darkened corridors and flickering lights seemingly mocking her as she walked deeper into the unknown. The feeling that she was being watched crept under her skin, and for a moment, she considered turning back. But then, she thought of her baby, the life that had been ripped away from her. And of the man she had married, who had deceived her and dragged her into a web of lies. This was no longer just about the truth. It was about justice. About finding out who was responsible for everything that had been taken from her. She paused in front of an unmarked door, her hand resting on the cold, steel handle. This was it. The moment of truth. She could feel it in her bones. Behind this door lay answers, or at least, more pieces of the puzzle she was desperately trying to solve. With a deep breath, Sarah turned the handle and pushed the door open. The room beyond was small, dimly lit, and filled with a cold, sterile atmosphere. At the far end of the room, a desk sat against the wall, papers scattered across its surface. A tall man in a suit was sitting behind it, his back to her, seemingly lost in thought. His name was Victor Hartman, a man whose name Sarah had heard whispered more than once in conversations she had overheard. He was one of them, the ones who had pulled the strings from the shadows. He was the kind of man who didn't play by the rules, the kind who believed that power and control were all that mattered. Mr. Hartman? Sarah's voice was steady, though her heart raced. He didn't turn around immediately. She could feel his eyes on her, even though she couldn't see his face. A long silence stretched between them before he finally spoke, his voice low and smooth, like the sound of a serpent slithering through tall grass. Sarah, you've been looking for answers, haven't you? Her breath hitched in her throat. The way he said her name, with such familiarity, sent a chill down her spine. How did he know she was looking for answers? How much did he already know? I'm not here to play games, Sarah said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. I want the truth. I want to know why my baby died. Why you're involved. Why David's involved. And why you've been watching me. Victor finally turned in his chair, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. His eyes were cold, calculating, like a predator watching its prey. He didn't look surprised to see her. In fact, he looked as if he had been waiting for her. You've been asking the wrong questions, Sarah, Victor said, his voice smooth and eerily calm. The real question is, why did you think you could walk away from all this? From what David and I are a part of? Sarah clenched her fists, her mind reeling. David didn't tell me anything, she said through gritted teeth. You all kept me in the dark. You made sure I lost my baby. And you think you can just get away with it? Victor stood up slowly, his tall frame casting a long shadow in the dim light. He crossed the room to stand in front of her, his presence overwhelming. You're not understanding the bigger picture, Sarah. You think this is about the baby? About David? It's not. This is about power, control. The system that keeps the world running, keeps people like you and me in our places. It's about making sure the right people stay in charge. He paused for a moment, his gaze locking with hers. You've seen the consequences of challenging that power. You've felt them. But you haven't seen the whole picture. You haven't even begun to understand what's at stake. Sarah's mind raced. What was he talking about? What system? What consequences? She couldn't let him intimidate her. She couldn't let him control the conversation any longer. I don't care about your system, Victor, she said, her voice gaining strength. I care about the truth. I care about what happened to my baby. You were the one who made sure it died, weren't you? Victor's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You think it's that simple? You think it's just about you and your baby? No, Sarah. You're just a pawn. You always have been. You were never meant to be part of this world. But David brought you in. He didn't realize what would happen. He didn't know that once you were involved, there was no turning back. Sarah's stomach churned. So you're saying my baby's death was just collateral damage? Victor's eyes darkened. Your baby's death was necessary. It was a warning, not just to David, but to you. You think you can change the rules of the game? You think you can walk away from this world? No, Sarah. That's not how it works. The room seemed to close in around her as she processed his words. Everything she had feared was true. They had planned it all. They had taken away the one thing she had loved most, to send a message. To send a warning. But Sarah wasn't going to let them win. Not now. Not when she was so close to the truth. She took a step forward, her resolve hardening. You may have taken my baby, Victor. You may have hurt me, tried to break me. But you're wrong if you think I'll just sit back and let you keep control. I'm done being a pawn in your game. Victor's smile faded, replaced by a look of cold calculation. You think you can stop this? You think you can bring down everything I've built? You're just a woman, Sarah. You're nothing compared to the power I control. You'll never understand the forces you're up against. This is bigger than you. Sarah squared her shoulders, looking him directly in the eyes. Maybe. But I'll be damned if I let you destroy everything I have left. There was a long silence, the air between them thick with tension. Sarah knew that this was just the beginning. She had uncovered something far darker than she could have imagined. But there was no turning back now. Not when she knew what was at stake. Victor's eyes narrowed, and for a brief moment, Sarah thought she saw something like fear flicker across his face. It was gone in an instant, replaced by a smirk. You're playing a dangerous game, Sarah, he said softly. And you have no idea how much danger you're really in. But Sarah didn't back down. I'm ready for whatever comes next. Victor chuckled darkly. We'll see about that. As she turned and walked toward the door. She knew she had only just begun to uncover the dark, dangerous world David had been hiding. The stakes were higher than ever, and the truth was more elusive than she could have ever imagined. But she wasn't going to stop. Not now. Not when she was this close. The air was thick with tension, the dark sky above like a heavy blanket pressing down on Sarah's chest. She could feel the weight of the past few weeks closing in on her, each step she took dragging her deeper into the labyrinth of lies and deceit that had been spun around her life. The revelations about David, the miscarriage, the people who had manipulated them, it was all too much to bear. But it was no longer just about uncovering the truth. It was about survival. She had already lost so much. Her child. Her trust in the man she loved. And now, as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, she realized that the ultimate threat was not just to her or David, it was to everything she had ever believed in. The distant hum of city traffic was muffled as Sarah walked through the quiet streets. The cold air nipped at her skin, but she barely noticed. Her mind was elsewhere, focused entirely on the task ahead. The letter David had left for her, the one that had set everything into motion, was now tucked in her coat pocket, its words still burning in her mind. She had read it over and over, trying to piece together the truth. She had followed every lead, asked every question, but with every answer she uncovered, another question arose. And now, she was about to face the last piece of the puzzle. The rendezvous was set. She had no choice but to meet with Victor Hartman once again. But this time, it wasn't just a meeting. It was a confrontation. She wasn't going to leave without the answers she needed. She wasn't going to walk away until she understood everything, who had orchestrated her miscarriage, who had been watching her, and why her life had been turned upside down. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she approached the building, the same building where she had met Robert and then Victor. It loomed before her like a fortress, cold and imposing, its windows dark, like eyes watching her every move. She knew they were watching. She could feel it in her bones. But she wasn't afraid anymore. Not like she had been before. Fear had no place in her life now. She had already lost too much to be intimidated. As she reached the door, her fingers trembled for the first time in weeks. She had come this far. There was no turning back now. With a deep breath, she pushed open the door and stepped inside. The lobby was eerily quiet, its sterile, glass walls reflecting the harsh light from the fluorescent bulbs above. She moved quickly, her footsteps steady but purposeful. She had no time to waste. She had one goal, and one goal only, to face Victor Hartman and demand the truth. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and Sarah stepped inside. She pressed the button for the top floor, where Victor's office was located. As the elevator ascended, she closed her eyes for a moment, trying to calm the racing thoughts in her head. She was almost there. The elevator reached the top floor, and the doors slid open with a quiet whoosh. Sarah stepped out into the hallway, her gaze scanning the space. It was the same as before, cold and impersonal. But now, it felt different, charged with an energy she couldn't quite explain. She could sense that things were about to change forever. At the end of the hall, she saw a door slightly ajar. Behind it, a dim light flickered, casting long shadows across the floor. She walked toward it, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. As she reached the door, she paused, taking a deep breath before pushing it open. Victor was sitting at his desk, just as she had seen him before. But this time, there was something different in his posture, something that made Sarah's stomach twist with unease. His eyes locked with hers as she entered, and a cold smile spread across his face. "Sarah," he said, his voice smooth but laced with something darker. "I've been expecting you." Sarah didn't say anything. She walked into the room and closed the door behind her with a soft click. She was done with games. She wasn't here to make small talk. She wasn't here to beg for answers. She was here to demand the truth. "You know why I'm here," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the nerves that were slowly building inside her. Victor stood slowly, moving toward her with calculated steps. "I'm sure you think you do," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "But you're still not seeing the full picture, Sarah. You're not understanding the magnitude of the situation you're in." "I understand enough," she said, her fists clenched at her sides. "I know what you did. I know what you and your people did to me. And I know what you did to my baby." Victor's smile faltered for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly. But then, he straightened, his demeanor returning to its usual cold, unflappable composure. "You think it was all me? You think I orchestrated it all? You're wrong, Sarah. There are bigger forces at play here. Forces you'll never fully understand." Sarah stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "No more lies, Victor. No more secrets. Who is behind this? Who is pulling the strings? And why was I targeted? What do you want from me?" Victor's expression hardened. He took a deep breath before speaking, his voice low and intense. "It's not about what I want, Sarah. It's about what they want. And you've already played your part. You've been a pawn in a much larger game, and now, you're going to realize just how far-reaching this goes." "What game?" Sarah demanded, her voice shaking with anger. "What are you talking about?" Victor took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "The game of power. The game of control. There are forces in this world that operate from the shadows, controlling everything. The media, the economy, politics. You think you're free? You think you have a choice? You don't. None of us do. We're all just cogs in a machine, Sarah." The weight of his words hit her like a physical blow. Sarah felt her knees weaken, but she refused to give in. "And my baby? Was that part of your game too?" Victor's gaze softened, just for a moment, and Sarah saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected, a flash of regret, perhaps, or maybe pity. But then it was gone, replaced by that same cold, calculating look. I didn't want that to happen, Sarah. But in the world we live in, sometimes sacrifices must be made. People like you, people who get too close to the truth, can't be allowed to live with that knowledge. You're a threat, and the moment you found out about this, you became part of the equation. Sarah's world seemed to tilt on its axis as she processed his words. She had never imagined that the truth would be so much darker than she could have ever anticipated. She had believed in the power of love, in the idea that she and David could escape this twisted world. But now she understood. It wasn't about love. It was about power. I won't let you get away with this, Sarah said, her voice low but fierce. I'll expose everything. I'll make sure everyone knows the truth. Victor chuckled, a dark, humorless sound that echoed through the room. You don't understand, Sarah. You can't fight something that powerful. You can't expose it. People like you are too small, too insignificant to take down the system. You'll try, of course, but in the end, it's futile. The system will always win. Sarah's heart raced, but she refused to back down. Maybe. But I'm not going to stop. Not now. Not when I've come this far. Victor's eyes gleamed with something like amusement, but there was a flicker of doubt there too. For the first time, he looked almost uncertain. But he quickly masked it, stepping back and folding his arms. We'll see how long your resolve lasts, Sarah. But don't say I didn't warn you. As Sarah turned to leave, she knew that this battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. The forces she was up against were larger than she could comprehend, but she wouldn't give up. She would fight for the truth, for justice, and for the memory of her lost child. No matter what it cost her.